They never fight back. Kaler sneered as he kicked over the small crate of supplies. The frail creature at his feet, one of the human colonists, didn't even raise its head. Around him, the rest of the raiding party laughed, their weapons glowing faintly in the dim light of the settlement. Look at them. Pathetic. They'd give up their own young if we asked. He spat on the ground and turned to his crew. Take everything. Burn what you can't carry. They won't stop us. They never do. For centuries, humans have been known as the galaxy's meekest inhabitants. They traded fairly, bowed to every demand, and surrendered every time they were threatened. Entire star empires had carved at their colonies like prey carcasses, each taking what they wanted. And every time, humanity simply lowered its head and said nothing. They had no fleets worth mentioning, no armies, no defenders. The galaxy called them the soft race. Some species enslaved them for labor. Others treated them as pets. Nobody feared them. Nobody even considered them dangerous. It wasn't always just about resources. Sometimes, raids were done purely for sport. There was a cruel pleasure in bullying those who never resisted. The story spread across systems. Humans would let you take whatever you wanted. They'd never fight back. They'd even thank you for sparing their lives. When the Vault Dominion glassed the colony of Darren for wiping out 2 million humans, the galaxy expected the same outcome as always. Sorrowful statements, maybe a plea for reparations, then silence. The humans never retaliated. They never even condemned the Dominion. The Vault commander laughed during an interview on the Galactic Net, proudly calling the act a lesson to the docile species who forget their place. No one batted an eye, and yet something felt different this time. After Darren, for the humans didn't send envoys to beg for peace. They didn't send any messages at all. Trade routes involving human settlements went dark. Their ambassadors resigned from the council without explanation. Entire colonies shut their ports, ceasing communication with outsiders. To most of the galaxy, it looked like another show of submission and acceptance of their suffering. But among the few who paid attention, there were murmurs. Traders reported strange activity near human space. Freight haulers filled with unregistered cargo, mining stations operating at unprecedented rates, and shipyards quietly expanding under heavy security. The humans weren't pleading this time. They weren't crying out for help. They were just silent. Kaler noticed it too late. As his crew ransacked the settlement, he caught sight of one of the humans staring at him. Not with fear, not with rage, but with something unsettlingly cold. The man didn't move, didn't protest, just stared with an expression that made Kaler's scaled skin prickle. For a moment, the laughter of his crew seemed to fade, replaced by the hollow sound of wind through the empty streets. There was no defiance, but there was no submission either, just an unbearable stillness, as if the man knew something Kaler didn't. The galaxy had taken everything from humanity over the centuries: worlds, pride, lives. Each humiliation had been accepted without a single act of retaliation. But what no one understood was that humans had never forgotten. They had never forgiven. They had been watching, waiting, learning. Every invasion, every slaughter, every insult had been written into a silent ledger. And now that ledger was full. Days later, the Dominion ships passed through human space with impunity. No patrols challenged them. No fleet scrambled to intercept. It was as if humans weren't even there anymore. The Council dismissed the rumors of human rearmament as baseless gossip. "They're too weak to fight," the Council speaker said, echoing the same words that had been repeated for generations. "They have no ships. They have no weapons. They have no will." But far from the bustling core worlds behind locked borders and encrypted communications, something was happening. Massive energy signatures pulsed briefly and vanished. Entire asteroid fields were being stripped bare. Old shipyards that had sat dormant for centuries suddenly blazed with light. Still, the humans said nothing. For Kaler, the unease only grew. A week after the raid, he remembered that humans' eyes. Not anger, not fear, just a look that lingered in his thoughts like a shadow. It wasn't submission. It wasn't weakness. It was calculation. He tried to dismiss it. They're harmless, he told himself. They've always been harmless. But the memory stayed, gnawing at him while his crew celebrated their victory. And then, without warning, the humans stopped showing up on galactic communications entirely. Their colonies sent no shipments. Their diplomats were gone. Entire sectors of space, once buzzing with trade, became ghost regions. Nobody knew why. Nobody cared. The galaxy had seen this pattern before. Humans retreating after yet another humiliation, licking their wounds, then re-emerging to beg for scraps. It was routine, predictable. But this time, the silence felt different. A single message was sent from the human homeworld to all colonies just before every comlink went dark. No translation was offered, just a simple phrase in their own language, incomprehensible to outsiders. Those who intercepted it described it as chilling, even without knowing what it meant. The galaxy shrugged and moved on. After all, humans never fought back. They never had, and that was their first mistake. The records were buried deep in archives so old that most believed them to be myths. Scholar Varen, a historian from the KRYL Dominion, was one of the few who cared enough to look. He had always found humans peculiar, too compliant, too careful. It didn't make sense. No species survived the chaos of the galaxy for so long without defending itself at some point. Yet every file, every report from the last 1,000 years told the same story. Humanity surrendered, retreated, submitted. Varen found a single name in a forgotten war chronicle, an ancient conflict known as the Syndral Purge. The entries were sparse, fragmented, but what little remained painted a horrifying picture. Humanity hadn't always been docile. Once, they'd been conquerors. Long before they entered the modern galactic order, they had waged a war so devastating that entire star systems vanished. There were no details of the weapons used, only vague mentions of world killers and engines of collapse. The chronicles ended abruptly, as if someone had deliberately erased the rest. That night, Varen couldn't sleep. The fragments were clear enough. Humanity had chosen peace. It wasn't that they couldn't fight. It was that they refused to. He filed a report to the Dominion Council, but it was ignored. Nobody cared about dusty records of an extinct war. Humans were weak. That was all that mattered. While the galaxy dismissed them, humanity moved silently. Mining fleets returned from uncharted sectors with rare elements that most species hadn't used in millennia. The Council monitored trade activity, but saw nothing alarming. The humans had learned to hide their movements well. They weren't building conventional fleets. There were no ship registries, no standard weapons purchases, no visible preparations. Everything they created was off the books, deep in the shadows of forgotten space. Entire moons became hollowed-out forges. Orbital stations were disguised as decaying relics, hiding colossal structures within. The humans had been preparing for years, maybe decades, while smiling, bowing, and handing over whatever the galaxy demanded. Their reputation as victims had been the perfect camouflage. Within a hidden facility orbiting a dying star, Admiral Soren stood before the assembled leaders of humanity. No speeches were given. There was no debate. The time for words had passed the moment Darren foreburned. Silent commands were issued. Long dormant AI cores hummed back to life, their cold logic untouched by centuries of disuse. Stored blueprints, designs too dangerous to ever be shared, were transmitted to the secret shipyards. Far from any prying eyes, the first of the nameless war machines emerged. They weren't ships in the traditional sense. They were mobile singularity generators, capable of collapsing stars with precision. They carried no insignias, no flags, no call signs. They were built only for one purpose: erasure. Commander Lyra, who oversaw one of the hidden stations, stared at the fleet forming before her. "Once we begin, there is no going back," she said softly. Her second-in-command, a man who had lost 3 siblings on Darren, 4, didn't hesitate. There was never any going back. They chose this for us. While the galaxy laughed at the idea of humans fighting back, fleets of unimaginable power waited in the dark. Trade routes were cut off intentionally. Communication ceased deliberately. The silence was not fear. It was the pause before a predator strikes. Some alien traders sensed it. They reported unusual behavior from human colonies. Towns quietly emptying overnight. Entire populations vanishing as if relocated. The council brushed it off as superstition. The humans weren't capable of such coordination. They never had been. But the truth was clear to those few who paid attention. Humanity had been preparing for a war that would not end with battles or negotiations. They weren't gathering allies. They weren't seeking justice. They were planning something final. And in the heart of their home system, a signal pulsed once, a single encrypted command that activated thousands of dormant constructs scattered across the galaxy. They had been hidden in plain sight for generations, disguised as research stations, mining drones, and communications relays. No one had seen them for what they truly were. The humans hadn't been weak. They had been waiting. The first system to fall never even saw it coming. The Vault Dominion's fleet, stationed around the prosperous trade hub of Orvis Prime, detected nothing unusual until every sensor went black in the same instant. A moment later, space itself bent and twisted like shattered glass. The Dominion's battleships, proud flagships that had once terrorized the galaxy, folded in on themselves as if crushed by invisible hands. In less than 3 seconds, the entire fleet was gone. Not destroyed, erased. The Orvis Prime defense grid activated too late. Its weapons fired wildly into the void, targeting ghosts. Then came the silence. The planet's core destabilized in a single, perfect strike. Those who looked to the sky saw for only a fraction of a second, a flash of impossible blue light. Before their world was reduced to debris, the humans had struck without warning, without declaration, without mercy. Across the galaxy, reports flooded in. Entire sectors went dark in minutes. No distress calls, no survivors. Whole fleets simply vanished. Alien commanders scrambled to assemble their armadas, but none of their weapons mattered. The human war machines didn't fight battles. They didn't duel fleets. They unmade them. At the HFY Dominion shipyards, alarms blared as dozens of massive carriers prepared for emergency launch. They never left the docks. A single human construct appeared above the planet. A black, angular shape that devoured light around it. The next instant, the shipyards were gone, vaporized along with every vessel within 100,000 kilometers. The galaxy panicked. Council worlds demanded explanations, but there were none. Humans weren't supposed to have fleets. They weren't supposed to have weapons. Yet one by one, every major power watched its territories burn. It became clear within hours that this wasn't war. There were no battles, no negotiations, no demands. It was systematic annihilation. The humans weren't fighting for territory or resources. They weren't even sparing civilians. Every target that had exploited them, enslaved them, or profited from their weakness was erased with absolute precision. Admiral Kren of the Seraph Empire broadcast a desperate plea for mercy, promising reparations, alliances, anything the humans wanted. His transmission was cut short by static, as a command station was obliterated mid-sentence. There were no replies, no ultimatums, no terms. The humans weren't listening. The galaxy's weapons failed against technology they couldn't even comprehend. Projectiles disintegrated before impact. Energy weapons dissipated harmlessly in empty space. The humans wielded constructs that bent the rules of physics, folding ships in half like paper, generating singularities at will, or detonating stars with surgical precision. Within 24 standard hours, entire empires ceased to exist. The Seraph core worlds were glassed in synchronized strikes. The Vault Dominion's ruling council was erased along with its home system. The HFY Dominion's fleets were gone, their planets reduced to drifting rubble. Survivors fled blindly into deep space, praying they wouldn't be next. But there was no safety. Humanity's machines were everywhere, appearing without warning, striking without hesitation, then vanishing as if they'd never existed. And just as quickly as it began, it ended. The galaxy that had mocked, enslaved, and plundered humanity for centuries was silent. Communications networks were filled with nothing but static. No fleets patrolled the hyperlanes. Entire sectors that had once glowed with trade and life were dark voids. When the last Dominion outpost was eradicated, the human fleet did not celebrate. There were no speeches, no victory broadcasts. The war machine simply returned to the void, disappearing as quickly as they had appeared. By the dawn of the next galactic cycle, countless civilizations had been wiped out. Planets that had once been bustling centers of culture and power were silent ruins. No one knew how many humans had survived, or if any remained to give orders at all. It was as if the entire galaxy had been rewritten overnight. Its once proud empires reduced to dust, while quiet architects of their destruction melted back into shadow. And in that silence, a single truth spread across the surviving fringes of space. The species everyone thought harmless had never been weak. It had simply been waiting. The transmission came 12 hours after the final system fell. It wasn't routed to the galactic network. It simply appeared on every functioning comm array at once, a single untraceable feed. A human figure stood in the center of projection. No armor, no insignia, just a calm expression that chilled every survivor who saw it. "We never wanted war," the figure said, voice steady and unshaken. "For centuries, we endured every insult, every wound, because we believed peace was worth more than vengeance. But you mistook our silence for weakness. You believed our mercy made us powerless. You were wrong." The message played simultaneously in thousands of languages. It wasn't angry nor triumphant. It was a simple statement of fact. The speaker's eyes were cold, unblinking. "You forced our hand. You burned our worlds, enslaved our children, and laughed while we begged for peace. And now, you know the cost of what you've done. We warned you without words. You didn't listen. There was no list of demands, no declaration of victory, no promise of peace, just the crushing weight of finality." The feed ended with a single phrase in the human tongue, a phrase that would haunt the survivors long after the voice faded. Those who later managed to translate it found it even more unsettling. Asterisk, the ledger is balanced. Asterisk, scattered survivors across the galaxy tried to rally what was left of their civilizations. But it was futile. Entire empires had been wiped out in hours. Worlds that stood for millennia were now lifeless rocks. Those few who escaped lived with the knowledge that humans had chosen not to pursue them, not because they couldn't, but because they didn't need to. Fear spread faster than any weapon. Refugee fleets whispered stories of human constructs still patrolling the void, silently watching. No one knew if they were automated or crude. No one dared to find out. In the decade that followed, the survivors rebuilt what fragments they could on the galaxy's distant edges. They formed small, hidden colonies, terrified of drawing attention. Entire species outlawed any mention of humans in public speech, as if speaking their name would summon them again. Scholars debated whether humanity had always possessed such power, or if they had rebuilt it over centuries in silence. It didn't matter. What mattered was that they were never weak, and they had proven it without hesitation. One final rumor spread, whispered by traitors too afraid to speak openly. Some claimed that fleets of human war machines had been seen leaving the galaxy entirely, heading into the dark between galaxies. Nobody knew where they were going. Maybe they were finally at peace. Maybe they were done with war forever. But every survivor feared the same possibility, that the humans had simply finished with this galaxy and were moving on to the next. The last surviving transmission from an alien outpost, sent moments before it went dark, contained only 4 words. Asterisk peace was always an option. But now, so is silence. Asterisk.